So there are different methods of copying and arranging objects in Blender. And the first one I'm going to show you is by using the array modifier. So you just got to click on the object you want to copy and search for array in the modifiers tab. And by default, we have a count of 2, which means there are 2 objects here that are sitting next to each other. You can put in however many count you want, or you can also just drag the parameters in Blender all together. And down here, you have the offset. We actually have 3 different types of offsets or spacing for the copies, and you can also combine them together. So now let's just stick with this relative offset. So what this does is it bases the spacing of the copies relative to the overall size of the geometry, right? It is basically going to measure, in this case, from this edge to the opposite one. So if you have 1, again, it is going to sit right next to each other. If you put 2, just imagine having another exact object in between them. So again, anywhere beyond 1 is gonna put some kind of spacing in between the copies. Now, if we go to the constant offset, now what this basically does is it is measuring the spacing from the very center of the object to the center of the copy. Now, one of its key difference between the relative offset is that if you go to edit mode with the constant offset turned on and rescale the object, it is going to keep its current location. Again, this is because the distance is measured from center to center. Whereas if you do this with the relative offset turned on, it is going to affect the spacing altogether. Now, let's just uncheck the 2 and then check this object offset. Now, what this object offset does is it bases the spacing of the array relative to another object. So we can use any object, but for me, I usually just get an empty. For this case, let's just get a plain axis, then pull it right here. Now, select the object, hit this eyedropper, and then pick the object reference. Now, as you can see, it is basing its spacing relative to that other object. If we go to Alt-Z and then move that reference object, it is going to, in real time, change its spacing. And this also affects its rotation. Now, for this merge option, what this does is it merges vertices that are close to each other within the array. So, for example, if I max this out, the maximum measurement of its threshold is 1 meter. You can't go beyond that. And if we close the space in between them, it is going to merge the vertices that goes below that threshold. So let's just check that. Just go to the object and apply the array. Go to edit mode and select the vertices that are in between the copies. As you can see, they are all merged. And if we go to Alt-Z, there are these interior faces that are stuck between them. So again, just to check, let's undo everything and uncheck the merge, right? Even if they're sitting right next to each other, like for example, let's go to relative offset and hit 1 and apply the array. It is not going to merge the vertices in between. Also up here, you have the option to kind of change the count of the array. You can actually change the fixed count to fit length. Now, what this does is it fits in the maximum amount of copies in a particular length. So the more I would kind of pull this parameter up, the more cubes there will be. And also you have the option to fit this into a curve. So for this example, we're going to need a curve. So let's just add a path for the sake of example and pull it here. Now let's just pull one of its vertices in edit mode. And now if we go back to the object and then select that with the eyedropper, it is going to kind of fit in the maximum amount of copies in that length of the curve. And by the way, I forgot to mention that you can also combine different axes, if you haven't already, in the different types of offsets. Now for the next method is by combining the array modifier with the curve modifier. So to do that, let's just get another cube and then apply the array once again. And let's just put this to 5 for the sake of example and put in a bit of spacing or offset. And then I'm going to get a curve for this. For this example, I'm just going to get a Bezier and then scale it up. And then select these main object and then search for the curve modifier, the modifiers tab. Here it is. Once you get that, you want to click on this eyedropper and then pick the curve. And now you have the array kind of following the path of the curve. You can also, if you want it to fit in exactly to this curve, you can also hit fit curve and then once again hit this eyedropper and then click on the curve. That's what I would usually do. But if you haven't noticed, the cubes are actually a little distorted along the kind of the shape of the curve. And this might be ideal in some cases, but there's a way to fix this if you want to retain the original shape. I'm gonna show you that right after this next method because it's kind of a combination of multiple methods. So for the next one, I'm gonna show you how to arrange and copy objects automatically using parenting. So in the scene, we have a cube and we're gonna need a non-manifold edge for this example. So I'm just get another cube and go to edit mode and collapse everything by hitting M and then collapse. And then let's just extrude the vertices. Let's go to object mode and then click on this cube, shift click on that edge that we just made and then hit Control P to parent it and then hit vertex. So after doing that, click on the edge and then go to the object properties, click on this instancing and then hit vertices. So now the cube is arranged to its vertex. This is a real-time thing. So if you happen to go to Alt-Z, happen to extrude this and add more vertices, it's going to add just more cubes, right? And you can also like extrude this, then hit subdivide, and we can even increase the amount of cuts. There are a lot of things you can do with this. Personally, I find this easier to make a radial array with. To do that, let's just delete this, then add a circle, and I'm going to do the same thing. Let's hit vertex, and then this again, and then vertices, right? And you also have the option to align to vertex normal. So there you go. And also you can rescale these cubes automatically by just clicking on the original object tab, and then just rescale the whole thing. Another thing that you can do with this, let's just delete this and then add a plane. So let's just extrude one of these edges. So we have another plane, and then repeat the command by hitting Shift R to get more of those faces. And once again, we're gonna do the same thing. Parent it, Control P, hit vertex, then click on the reference object and hit faces. By the way, you can also do vertices. Obviously, it's gonna put the cubes to the vertices, and if you hit faces, as you can see, it is adding cubes to each of the faces. You also have the option to scale. If you check this, basically what this does is it rescales the object according to the scale of the faces. So if you go to the cube, just rescale it so you can see what's going on, and go to edit mode in the reference object and rescale this. The cube right now is smaller in this part because the face is also smaller, and if we scale this up, it will also affect the cube, right? Alright, so I'm going to teach you how to fix the distorted objects that are arranged along a curve. You're going to need a placeholder for this, so let's just get a plane. So what we're going to do is apply the modifiers to this plane, and then we can use the other method to parent this cube to the plane so that it doesn't get distorted. So let's just remove all these modifiers, select the plane, search for array, or you can just copy the modifiers here all together and then delete it for the cube. But in this case, I am doing it all over again. And then, like I said, we have to parent it like the other method to the plane. Select the plane, go to object data properties. And right now, by the way, I think I forgot to tell you that this is position sensitive. So in this case, the objects are not aligned. So I'm just going to have to change the position of the cube. And let's just rescale the cube so that we can see properly what's going on. So this time it is the plane that's being distorted, and we're just parenting the cube so that it doesn't affect its geometry. So again, if you want to apply this, just gotta click on that, then hit Control A, make instances real, and there you have your not distorted version of the cubes. Bonus tip on working with instances. In this example, we have a cube that is arranged along the vertex of a path. So if for some reason you have to apply these instances, you go to Control A and then make instances real. If you go over to edit mode into one of these cubes, you will notice that these copies are all instance, and any changes you make to any one of these is going to affect the rest of them. And so if you want to make any of this unique, you just have to select it and then go to this object data properties, and then click on this number. And so with that, if you make any changes to that object, it's not going to affect the rest. And if for some reason you want that back, like for this example, let's just get to this other cube. This is an array modifier. If we hit apply, and so let's say you want to make these objects kind of instanced to one another. So what I would do is just select everything, and then hit P, then separate them by loose parts, and then just go to the object mode, select all of them, make sure one of them is highlighted yellow, right click, and then double O. That's gonna set all their origins to their centers. Hit Control L, link object data, and after that, once we go to edit mode to one of these cubes, as you can see, they are now instanced with one another. Now for this last part, I'm going to teach you how to make a radial arrangement using the extrude tool. For this method, it is going to base its arrangement around the 3D cursor. So we're going to have to edit the 3D cursor for this. So what I would do is get an empty, and I'm just going to pull it here, and then we can go Shift S to snap the 3D cursor to that object. So cursor to selected. Then we're going to click on the main object and then go to edit mode, select everything, go Alt E, and then click on spin. So it is now spinning around the 3D cursor, but if you haven't noticed, it is not straight. So what I would do with this is go to the axis and just put everything to 0, and now you have that fixed. Personally, I find this a bit obsolete and not so very practical compared to the other options, but it's nice to know. Subscribe for more videos.